So we've done a pretty good job in this class of covering layouts and ortho-iso. Perspective has obviously come up in the design sketches, it always does. But I want to go a little bit more in depth with perspective moving forward in the class. So we're going to start with 1 point and then we'll work our way up to 2 point and hopefully 3 point as well. So the assignment is to do a stepwell, I'll get to that in a moment, which is an interior architectural space. And I'm going to revise the assignment and remove some of the restrictions that I had placed on it, mainly that for those of you that don't want to draft, you can do the assignment freehand. But it's going to be one drawing, one single 2-hour-ish drawing. So this is going to be review for most of you. I think I might have shown these slides before as well, and if you feel like you've got a good handle on how 1 point works, then feel free to skip to the Stepwell section, which will explain the assignment imagery. So 1 point perspective is the easiest to understand of the 3 perspectives. Actually, there's much more than 3, but it's because you can draw objects from their faces. So you can actually measure one of the planes, which is the facing plane. So in this case, the front of the cubes. Orthogonal means at right angles, and in perspective, those are the lines that appear to diminish, descend, and converge when they go into space. And in 1 point perspective, they all go to a single spot. Classic example of 1 point perspective is standing in a hallway or on some train tracks, nice big long open space, and you can see that the lines end at a single point on the horizon line, vanishing point there, and all the horizon lines in my PowerPoint here are red, and all the orthogonals I've done in green. So the one single vanishing point is eye level. It's whatever you're looking at that moment. So this person is standing on the train tracks, and if they had like a laser beam coming out of their eyes and they looked straight out, it would touch the horizon. That's where the point is. Image by Piranesi. So we've got a nice deep space, and you can see that the lines of the ceiling and all of the columns and architectural elements are pointing to this single individual vanishing point in the distance. It's right there. This image is nice because it presents us with a mathematical problem. The columns are all the same size, and the ceiling tiles are all the same size. How do you know how much smaller they should get as they move backwards into space, and how much closer together they get? And I'm going to talk about that again in a minute, and I'm also going to show you how to do that in the demo. Most famous 1 point perspective space probably ever made is Raphael's School of Athens. So in the center of the painting is the main subject, and that's Plato and Aristotle. And you can see that the architectural space is created around them. All of these lines in the image are pointing to the two of them. Those are the most important people in the picture and the main focus of the picture. The School of Athens itself is from the ancient world, ancient Greece. Raphael lived in the Renaissance about 1,500 years later, so he had to figure out a way of inventing this imaginative space from the ancient world, and he uses 1 point perspective to do that. Painting here by Gustav Caillebotte. And Caillebotte is one of my favorite impressionists, largely because he's really not an impressionist at all. He's more of a solid realist, like one of the last true realists. And he was a really interesting guy. His father passed away when he was about 23 years old and left him this vast fortune, so he didn't have to work. So he was befriended the Impressionists. He was friends with Renoir and Claude Monet and all those people. And they really encouraged him to learn how to paint. The logic there being that this person has all this time on their hands. They don't have to have a regular job. They could focus on making art. And he did just that, and he became a great painter. most of his, well, a lot of major paintings by Caillebotte are in the Art Institute of Chicago. This one's in a museum in Switzerland. So Caillebotte was a contemporary of all the Impressionists, and he often helped them out a lot. Like he would buy their paintings if they were desperate for money. For a while, he paid Claude Monet's rent to help keep him afloat. And he amassed a really beautiful collection of Impressionist paintings. There's about, I was told, like 75 to 80 oil paintings in his collection, and he offered them to the government of France as a gift to the French National Museums. This was before Impressionism was a household word or wildly famous and valuable, and they said, no, we don't want the paintings. And they ended up in Philadelphia, of all places, at the Barnes Foundation. So if you want to see the Caillebotte Impressionist collection, you have to go there. So we've got the main subject of the painting here is the man and woman talking to each other. A lot of Caillebotte's work is about the loneliness of the modern world. Things were changing a lot at the turn of the century, and it was making people uneasy. So there's this lonely man looking out over the Seine, and then a pair of people walking with each other in this sort of like funky, empty-ish bridge. So he uses this device the same way that, say, Raphael did. He uses it to point the viewer's eye towards the space between the man and the woman, so that we're visually engaged with this conversation that's taking place in the air between them. But again, we get to that classic problem in perspective. How do you know how big the railings should be as they go backwards in space? And the answer is that you use straight lines to break them up systematically. And I'll go into this in depth when I do the drawing demo so that you know how to do it. We here in Milwaukee have a painting by Caillebotte. It's a really, really good example of his work. Probably one of the best paintings in the museum. It's on the second floor with the Monet and all the other Impressionist paintings. It was purchased by the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel when these big wealthy corporations build, or a bank builds a new skyscraper or headquarters. There's always a budget set aside for decoration and purchase of artworks. And some very forward-thinking person at the Journal-Sentinel decided that they should have a Caillebotte in the office. Another example of a painting that today we could never afford. It was purchased a long time ago, and then eventually it was deemed too important to stay at the Journal-Sentinel, so it was transferred to the Milwaukee Art Museum. So what we're going to look at for the assignment as the subject, and you can interpret this broadly, are stepwells. So in Europe, let's say Northern Europe, if you needed to get fresh water, you would dig a well. It would just be a hole in the ground. It went straight down until you hit the water table, and then you'd send down a bucket and lift it up to get you water. But there's this really incredible architectural work that was done in Asia that completely subverts that idea. And that was that you would build an inverted pyramid into the ground with steps all around it, and then you would walk down to the water, and then you would carry it back up. So often when I show these to students, they think that it's a Photoshop or something, and it does kind of look like a video game environment, but these are 100% real. And if you think about what life is like around the equator in the summer, it's very, very hot. So what happened was, after these were built, people would hang out inside them because it was so nice and cold. So it was a refreshing place to go during the heat of the day. The result of that is that they became important centers of civic engagement, and wealthy kings and queens in the area would commission these elaborate, beautiful stepwells. So these are mostly in India, but also there are examples in Pakistan and Bangladesh. And there's all different types. This one is really interesting, the attelage, and I'm not going to try to pronounce most of these words because I will probably get them wrong. But this one is a double helix structure. So if you imagine what DNA looks like, that's what the stairs around the center of the stepwell as you go down into the earth, how they're set up. And that way you never have a traffic jam because you have one set of stairs for going up and one set of stairs for going down. So really elaborately decorated, beautiful works of architecture. And they're still there. So if you're ever in India, definitely go see a stepwell. It's on my list for sure. So I threw in a lot of examples here to get ideas flowing. So you can think about how you would want to do this in one point. And I'll show you how to set that up when I do the demo. So as very old buildings often do, these are, you're looking at 1,000 plus years. Some of them have fallen into disrepair. Same way you see ancient buildings in Europe, Middle East. Now, I said you can interpret the assignment broadly. You're designing a stepwell, but that doesn't mean it can't be modern and futuristic. It doesn't have to look old. So a contemporary architect that was looking at stepwells for this project in New York is Thomas Heatherwick. And he is your typical starchitect. He does all these really expensive, flashy architectural projects for very, very wealthy people. He gets a lot of criticism for it. And I get that, but the work is very interesting, I think, and worth looking at. So this is the freehand napkin sketch, classic idea in architecture where you whip out these really fast little sketches quite quickly. And you'll be doing your own preparatory work for the drawing. You'll make some thumbnails in your field journal. Here's a 3D model of his idea, and he was looking at stepwells. It's pretty obvious that he was doing that. This is a new development in Manhattan called Hudson Yard, and the developers that were building all these skyscrapers wanted a flashy sculpture to go in the center. And when you want a flashy, eye-catching sculpture, Thomas Heatherwick's the kind of person you would hire. So this is it under construction. I never saw it completed. The last time I was in New York, it was under construction. And these are some of the renderings of it. So it's pretty ridiculous. But it's an interesting way of thinking about the idea of a stepwell and making it modern. So this is literally a $200 million staircase to nowhere. So make of that what you will. All right, that's the end of the video. Check out the next video, which is the demo, which will show you how to get your drawing set up. And as always, if you have questions, get in touch.